we've worked with them over the last few years. In New York, we're partnering with a tech hub comprised of three communities, Syracuse, Buffalo, and Rochester, that are creating a new governance structure, trying to knit together three existing coalitions that have historically competed against each other, but are now working together to build a semiconductor and microelectronics corridor in upstate New York. And I should say too, like all of these coalitions require, higher ed, workforce, economic development, business and industry, all coming together around some sort of shared objective, and trying to figure out where that Venn diagram is, where they want to align their interests. In Virginia, we're collaborating with the Alliance for Building Better Medicine in Richmond, Petersburg, which is leading an advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing coalition. Our relationship in this region goes back many years, but they recently, in December, just won a Good Jobs Challenge grant to create a new sectoral workforce intermediary organization to coordinate the development of new credentials and pathways into an estimated 11,000 jobs that they expect to create in the next 5 years. And at America Achieves, we have been guiding this work by helping them map the assets and resources that they'll need in order to fulfill the workforce intermediary functions in the region. And then lastly, in Montana, we've supported the Headwaters Tech Hub, which is a coalition focused on creating a world-class photonics sector in Montana that will create an estimated 25,000 good jobs for local residents over the next 10 years. And photonics, I didn't know what this was, but photonics are smart sensors that can be applied to a lot of different technologies, including drones or farm equipment or biomedical devices. And as part of getting that grant, they have decided to spin off a new organization to lead that work. So we have been advising on like some of the organizational structures they'll need to be successful, like creating bylaws, decision-making norms, identifying sustainable funding, and supporting the development of a workforce strategy. So with all this, you're probably wondering, like, what does it mean for Minnesota and Minnesota State? And so I can like lend my perspective to that, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. With several statewide coalitions here focused on medtech, CHIPS, and then, sector partnerships around key workforce priority areas. Coalitions like these, multi-sector coalitions like these, really require coordinated and intentional collaboration across, these different sector actors, ranging from higher ed to business and industry. And establishing shared governance and a collaborative approach is really important to ensure that you're building relationships and a culture of collaboration that extends beyond individual initiatives towards the bigger picture of what you want your workforce development and economic development systems to look like. And we believe as an organization that in order to truly have sustainable economic growth, you really have to have these different sectors working together hand in hand. It also has, as you know, potential to create more efficient feedback loops between, training providers and industry, so that you have more real-time information around what jobs are going to be created, what are the specific skills that, employers are looking for, and allows for a little bit more long-term planning. So in my mind, Minnesota State is a really important partner in this space as like an affordable, high-quality, accessible, trusted training partner. And, it's important to like be in partnership with the folks sitting here, but also I think there's a real opportunity for the system to contribute to this national conversation around what works in place-based partnerships. So with that, I will turn it over to Aisha.
Thank you, Allison. Can everyone hear me? We want Minnesota to win. You hear what's going on in other cities and regions, and we need to make sure that Minnesota continues to remain a competitive state, and that students who are matriculating through the state system are getting into the top jobs that are emerging in our economy. Hello, my name is Aisha McKenzie Collins. I'm with Greater MSP Partnership. I wear several hats there. For the last year, I've led the Itasca project as interim director, and my role is transitioning into one where I'll be leading some of our talent and workforce partnerships and engagement. So really happy to be here. Greater MSP has been around since 2011, and we have really served that role in our region of how do we build inclusive economic growth within the MSP region and be a hub. And so what you see on the slide in front of you is this opportunity for advancing industry workforce partnerships, with Greater MSP hoping and looking to play a role as a backbone organization that is connecting all of these partners. So connecting industry partners in emerging industries, as you've heard, we've mentioned the CHIPS Coalition and tech hubs and MedTech, right? These are the areas where we see the most growth and opportunity in Minnesota, and we know that our economy is going to grow from those and jobs will come from those. And so as we think about the right strategic partner to have at the table, Minnesota State is key. And, you know, through the work I've led over the last couple of years around diverse early career talent, I've worked individually with some of the colleges within the system, but I think it is fantastic that we have a system office that Shannon is leading along with Phil, because we want to really have a coordinated approach as opposed to working in a fragmented way with the individual colleges. We know how important that is for the thought leadership in Minnesota. And so what you see in front of you, again, which has been really led by Katie, who will speak in a moment, the Governor's Workforce Development Board is really driving and pushing all of us in Minnesota to work together in more coordinated ways. We all know how confusing and challenging these ecosystems can be to navigate. And so we are trying to really get organized with Minnesota State as an anchor partner. As we move into this particular workforce partnership, Polar Semiconductor has been one of the key partners. They're based in Bloomington. They're at the table wanting to create thousands of jobs, and they're looking for where they can hire the talent. And so this partnership, as you can see, really aligns higher ed, basic education, local workforce boards, and other organized labor organizations to really kind of bridge the needs from education into career. And so that's really the role that we're looking to play here. On the next slide, it touches a little bit on some of the statewide benefits, but really, again, we know that in order for Minnesota to win, we're going to have to work together. And a lot of the things that we are testing or piloting in the MSP region, we really want those to scale statewide. And so again, that's why partnering with Minnesota State is critical, because it's not just about Minneapolis and St. Paul, it really is about the entire state and creating that shared prosperity. So we're really excited to be a part of this partnership. I really see my role as sort of being the glue that brings this group together, make sure that we're we're aligned. We're building out this action plan that we're currently working on of what actions can we do together across this table and other tables to really move this work forward. So excited for the opportunity to keep growing and learning together. I think the relationship building that we've already started is establishing that sense of trust and connection and connectivity, which is important for us to actually be able to get things done. So glad to be here, and thank you guys for listening to what we're up to.
Katie, if you don't mind, I just want to make a point. Aisha brought up Polar Semiconductor in the CHIPS initiative. I want to make sure that all of you know that we currently have two of our colleges, Normandale and Hennepin Tech, who are at the table and working very intently with Polar Semiconductor in creating curriculum for requests that they've had for their workforce. And I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Katie McClelland. I am the Executive Director of the Governor's Workforce Development Board, and I'm also the Senior Advisor for Strategy and Alignment at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And a big part of my role in the hats that I'm wearing is trying to help us better identify ways for all of the great work that's happening, or all of what I sometimes call our silos of excellence that exist in Minnesota, to be better aligned. And so with this work, I'll talk a little bit more about how that directs, or how this work kind of connects into all of that. But with the Governor's Workforce Development Board, we really exist to try to better inform best practices, understand best practices that are happening across the state and across the country, so that we can be applying them with our partners. This talks about state agencies. There's also a group that I'm leading called the Interagency Workforce Alignment Task Force. It really rolls off the tongue, but it's made up of commissioners from a number of our state agencies who have workforce development programs or tangential programs to help us as a state also get to better alignment and strategy around our vision for workforce development, and understand using the Governor's Workforce Development Board as an external partner to hear what's happening on the ground, or where there are challenges that we can then better inform our state
about how to make improvements, give feedback, things like that. So in Minnesota, it could look like there being a manufacturer that has a major layoff in a region. Deed can then inform that sector partnership about the layoff, about those jobs that would be in demand, because I'll also remind folks that there are currently 10 jobs open for every 6 people looking for jobs. So we are in a place where there's a lot more demand for work than there are people looking. But people also want better jobs. And so if we can inform those partnerships of people that are looking to transition, and we have our Minnesota State colleges at the table for these different partnerships across the state, we can better and faster or more quickly identify what are those skills that people need? What's the kind of real-time training that we can get people into those jobs faster, so that we're shortening the time for people to be unemployed. We're shortening, or we're increasing the time to competitiveness, or time to, what's the word that I'm looking for? When people are time to productivity for the individuals in those jobs. And so again, a lot of this though comes back to, in order for this to all actually work, people need to understand their roles and responsibilities in a partnership and help make sure that the puck's moving forward. And so I think we're really excited about this, because as we're looking at this partnership, we're hoping that it can be a model that then we use to scale across the state. So this is why just partnering with Greater MSP, it's a first step. We really see this as a first step, testing out this model and have it being something that we can bring to partnerships across the state that we at the GWDB will start mapping out and working with Minnesota State and other partners to understand where they exist. And then also making sure that those backbone organizations, as Aisha was talking about, have the skills, have the tools, have the resources they need to help make sure that people that are all participating in the partnership clearly understand the vision, their roles, and clearly understand the benefits that they're getting from participating in it. So it'll help the employers, it'll help the individuals, it'll help the communities.
Good morning. I just want to share that it's not only a privilege to be asked as a system to play a role in the strategy of this governance, but it also signifies how the perception, again, that our partners in our state and in this ecosystem have about the importance of our system playing in workforce and economic development. And our division, the Workforce and Economic Development Division of Minnesota State, we're focused right now on the strategic goals in the Chancellor's work plan. And this collaboration and focus on regional strategy governance will not only help us to accomplish these goals, but to help us be more intentional and strategic about the role our colleges and universities play in contributing to the workforce and to the prosperity, the economic prosperity, and the prosperity of our state in general. And again, so we're excited to play a role, and we're excited to see how this governance will benefit many of our colleges and universities that are involved in various regional strategies as well. I'll pass it to Shannon.
So thank you, everyone. So again, really the intention today was informational. This is a new project that we're getting involved with, so there's much more to come. But I think at the end, collaboration is really the goal, but it's also the game plan. And so wanted to share with you our involvement, and as we continue down this path, we will be reaching out to our colleges, our universities, the presidents, various departments to be involved, especially as we're getting deeper involved with a lot of the tech hub work right now. And so with that, we want to open it up just to answer any questions or thoughts you might all have.
Thank you very much. We're entering the time now for questions. We have, as a part of our agenda, a little review of policy, so that I'm going to watch the time. We have about 10 minutes for questions, and I'd like to begin by asking you, if I'm understanding this correctly, in a visual way, I'm thinking of it as a way of bringing people together in order to, and the right people at the table to achieve an economic development objective for the state, for Minneapolis, St. Paul, or for eventually for the whole state. And this is a shared governance process that brings the right, identifies who should be at this table in order for us to be successful at achieving maybe some federal money or some clearly defining various roles that we need to pull together in order to be successful at this objective. And that's how I'm visualizing this. In this particular project that you're occurring now, who pulls the people together to be at the table? Who says this is what we're going to go after, and here's who needs to come to the table around this object?
Well, I think that really depends on the community. And so if we look at a national view for, as I mentioned, other states that are doing this really well, there are examples where it could be an economic development organization or a community college or a local workforce board. There's kind of a wide variety. But what we're seeing is that backbone organization does still need additional support. Unfortunately, in a lot of places, that role or the role is assumed. It's not necessarily defined. So people all assume that someone would step up to the table to help bring these partnerships together, but it doesn't always happen that way. And so I think what we're trying to do in Minnesota is both understand that some of this work is already happening in communities, that we need to better map out where they are and identify opportunities to help improve the work that they're doing. But then in other communities, we may have a group of employers, which is something that we found, I think, with both CHIPS and tech hubs, where we had groups of employers who were all working individually, all approaching your institutions individually, asking for courses individually. And that doesn't actually get us to the scale of the need. And so I think as we're doing this work moving forward, our hope is that we are better able to help whoever that backbone organization is. And in this case, with this partnership, it's Greater MSP. Understand how to bring together the employers to get that collective employer voice, so that we're not creating a number of individual programs that can't sustain semester or trimester, semester after semester. And then I think also making sure that we're doing a better job of or that partnership is doing a better job of communicating out to their regions the opportunities that exist, because that's another thing that we're finding in a number of these places, that a lot of people don't necessarily know that we have a strong semiconductor manufacturing industry or sector in the state, and students don't necessarily know that these opportunities exist. And each one of the employers trying to do outreach to communities isn't going to work. So the idea with this too is that we're doing a better job of bringing collective voice together, but then also sharing out this information within our communities. And so hopefully that will translate to, even if the community colleges aren't the backbone organization, they're a key partner in each of them. And there, I think, will be some instances where they may make sense to be that partner as well.
Thank you. Is there a question? We can begin with Trustee Johnson.
So I'm Bat Johnson. two of us. Thank you. I don't really have questions, but more comments, and I just really appreciate the additional detail. I got to hear a little bit of this by participating in the committee meeting earlier. It does really strike me, and I just want to say it out loud again, that Minnesota State is really uniquely positioned to address many of these things, but in particular, the rural-urban divide. Having spent 11 years in Morris, Minnesota, that element of trust, Allison, that's on that list of things that you talked about, doesn't happen easily and takes time with relationship building. And I'm not sure how much AI probably can contribute to that in some ways, but it requires a lot of people at the table and face to face. I really appreciated, Allison, your articulation of some of the elements of structure. I know when I first heard about this and the concept of shared governance that I'm very familiar with, having spent a long time as a faculty member at an institution where it mattered, but that there needs to be structure and, God forbid, some bureaucracy, bylaws, articulation of roles and responsibilities, I think will go a long way to helping people understand trustee share, and not only who is at the table, but how people are at the table, who has what responsibilities and what rights. So I think this is really exciting, and I see it as a tremendous opportunity and kind of a responsibility for this system. And I appreciate, Aisha, this sense that MSP really has this broader perspective that you can model, and that model can help inform other communities throughout the state of how they might participate. So thank you.
Trustee Grabowska?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So perhaps this is a little too weedy, but I think this is also very, very exciting. In your nascent discussions, have you talked about resourcing these programs, especially, and perhaps in particular, from the point of view of our post-secondary institutions?
I could start and then. We have been really focused on a lot of these federal programs that are providing kind of catalytic seed money, one, to catalyze action, but to also fund, very specific projects that support sector-based partnerships like this. And I think one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about as an organization is like what happens after year 4 or 5 when these federal resources, kind of conclude. And so we advise a lot of our regions and brainstorm a lot around what is a long-term sustainable funding model that includes, hopefully in an ideal world, in a partnership like this one, where everyone is willing to bring their resources to the table to sustain the work. I think philanthropy can play a role in kind of like continuing some of that initial investment, but even that is, I don't think, a realistic way to fund something long-term. And so our hope by focusing on governance, which I appreciate the comment, it's like not super interesting, but it's like, I find it fascinating and it's really, really important. Ideally, we're building partnerships that everyone wants to invest in. And that includes the partners sitting around the table, state, local, county governments, so that it is everyone has buy-in, everyone's contributing, and hopefully, everyone's reaping the benefits of the outcomes you're trying to achieve around good jobs and economic growth.
And I would just add that, I think that the resourcing of these partnerships is a major challenge, just to be candid. The CHIPS partnership, for example, we have been together for about a year and a half, and we have not been able to make as much advancement as we would like because, the Governor's Workforce Development Board isn't a project manager for partnerships. We're a strategic partner. We haven't, individual organizations don't necessarily have the resources to dedicate full-time staff to these partnerships, which honestly, that's often what it takes to have an individual who's making sure that there's follow-up items to the meetings that you have with the cohort, and that you're moving things forward, and that you're working with the colleges to make sure that the curriculum is responsive to what they heard, and that you're working with the community-based organizations to get people into these pipelines that, have not traditionally thought of them. So that's a challenge. And it's something that we at the GWDB are looking at and trying to determine how we can be better support. I mean, our role really is kind of the technical assistance side, but our hope through this governance model too is that we're building a structure that people can then see the value in, and so that employers may want to provide, step up in providing funding, or that people understand, or philanthropic organizations see that this is something that's worth investing in, so that long term there can be a model where this becomes a funding priority and not just something that would be nice to do. But I think right now we have to share the value, and that's what we're building.
I'll just add to that, Katie, to that point. I mean, I think the employers who are trying to establish these emerging industries really have a stake in the game and really need to be the ones investing in getting this off the ground. And so we're looking to the companies that you saw in that microelectronics partnership to fund building out this backbone and helping us to support the coalition. So I think the employers really, we want them to step up to the table, especially since they're receiving federal funding to scale their work.
Thank you, Chair Sharon. Oh, sorry.
Last week, I was delighted to participate in a panel at the Davos Summit in Switzerland on neurodiversity. And the three sectors you highlighted, Shannon, med tech, biomed, chips, are the kind of sectors where people who are neurodivergent, neurodistinct are more apt to find jobs. And I was struck, Aisha mentioned we have 10 jobs and only 6 applicants. Or was that Kate? One of you said.
Yeah.
The people who have autism have an 80% unemployment rate. So if today Elon Musk or Bill Gates were applying for a job, they probably wouldn't be hired. And so how are you working with the employer sector to rethink the way they hire people? My sense is that the interview process in particular is difficult for someone who may have autism, right? Looking people in the eye, being social, chatty, or someone who has ADHD like I do, fitting into the neurotypical work environment can be difficult. And a lot of employers are out front of higher education, honestly, on these things. Boston Consulting Group is working on it. Our former colleague, Rudy Rodriguez, who leads diversity efforts at Ameriprise, thank you, Jay, was ahead of us on this. So I'll stop talking, but I just want to make sure that the 25% of the population that are neurodistinct are not forgotten given the need for workforce.
Well, I was looking into to see if you wanted to talk about the Drive for 5 grant that Hennepin Tech, I believe, got for the CHIPS partnership. Yeah, that I think actually kind of really did, because a big part of this is that we need to be looking at underutilized talent pipelines. Thinking about language that will work in this new administration, that's something I'm testing out. But it is absolutely a place that we're looking, and I think there is actually an example with our CHIPS partnership where I believe Hennepin Tech received a grant for looking at the populations that you're talking about to try to provide stronger pathways into manufacturing roles. Because you're right that we aren't going to fill the labor force shortage that we have right now by just looking at traditional pathways into jobs. We need to be looking at people that are unemployed or underemployed, especially the underemployed folks who might want better pathways. But I think a big part of this, again, is that people don't know how to find these jobs, or they don't know that they're applicable to them and that they could be benefiting from them.
And I think that really CECT departments in particular have a different way to have conversations with employers to really find out how they're sourcing talent and making certain that they're looking in every avenue of hiring our students, from those students who are neurodivergent to students who are having some kind of learning disability to the students who are graduating from our program. So for me, I think that's a really important conversation we need to be having with employers. So yes, point well taken.
Oh, thank you very much for this fabulous presentation and stimulating conversation about how, especially for the Minnesota State System for us board, this is the Outreach and Engagement Committee. This is an outreach initiative for us, and we clearly appreciate and your understanding of the importance for the state as well as for us that Minnesota State, who's preparing the workforce, is at the table when we're engaged in these kinds of initiatives. So thank you very much. Thank you for this presentation. Next subject, as people are moving about for our board, is to review a couple of policies related to outreach and engagement. I'm hoping that as you listen to this presentation, that you understand that outreach engagement as a committee is very focused on the concerns that we all have about our capacity to raise revenue in other ways other than money that we receive from the legislature. And so these policies are very important. They relate to each of the individual campuses in terms of how they are able to engage in the process of raising resources for needs that they have on the campuses, and we're talking about how our state system interfaces with the campuses in order to help them achieve these objectives. We have other ideas at the committee about this subject of how can we better find ways to bring resources to our campuses to supplement what they're receiving from the legislature or other revenue sources. But for today, we're going to review these two policies. Sometimes when we review these policies, they're sort of, oh, this is what we have to do every 5 years. But I'm hoping you'll listen closely and ask questions if you need to about what we're doing in this area, because I think it's critical to an overall objective that we have to keep the economic condition of the system in a good place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Marketing Office Director, Noelle Houghton, to introduce the subject and present the two policies. By the way,
thank you, Chair Sharon. My colleague Jen Dobbasy has been working with the foundation leaders, the finance department, and a few other team members throughout the system to think holistically about some policies that impact our foundations. And they've been working on this for over a year, and they bring before you today the fruit of their labor. Jen?
Thanks, Noelle. Trustee Charon, Chair Sewell, and the Outreach and Engagement Committee, Policy 8.3, College and University-Related Foundations, as shared, this is a first reading. The board packet contains the clean version with all the track changes approved, followed by the marked up version of the proposed amendments. As Noelle shared, it's been an over a year-long process working with foundation directors, general counsel, finance, and internal audit, and with input from presidents. So a few things I'd just like to highlight here. The key points of the proposed policy amendment: added descriptions that further define the work of advancement and include the terms development and stewardship. It provides additional clarity on the roles of related foundations, and added language that emphasizes the alignment of the college, university, and the related foundation strategic work to support advancement. Two key points I'd like to raise is the first that is in these proposed amendments is that language that speaks to foundations play a central role in the coordination, solicitation, acceptance, acknowledgement, and stewardship of donations to the college or the university. And then the second point in these proposed amendments to just bring to your attention is Subpart D, Foundation Reports. So a reporting requirement was amended in Part 4, Subpart D, for foundations that have revenues under $750,000 in a fiscal year. The proposed revision is to provide a less burdensome options in addition to an audit for those foundations that, again, have revenues under 750K in a fiscal year. And these proposed amendments are recommended after extensive consultation with auditors in the Finance Division, so accountability is not compromised. So the proposed amendment says they must report one of the following once every 3 years: an audited financial statement or a financial statements review performed by a CPA firm, or the results of agreed-upon procedures with a CPA firm focused on internal controls as specified in Operating Instruction 8.3.1. So the audit is the most burdensome, and an agreed-upon procedures is the less burdensome in these amendments. And so I think I'd just pause there now and see if there are any questions regarding Policy 8.3 for this first.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Trustee Janicek.
Not that many under, well, I'd have to get back to you on the specific number, but feedback from some of our smallest ones has been it's very, very appreciative. And so I can get back to you on a number. There are some, but I would like to get back to the specific number. Not them.
Trustee Sewell.
What are the reporting requirements for foundations that exceed this 750?
An audited financial statement and CPA review every year. Those have not changed.
Okay, thank you. And
Trustee Sol.
I don't think we're getting any sound out of these microphones anyway. Maybe over the streaming, maybe over the internet, but I don't think in this room there's any amplification. So I have a question about spending foundation money. And are there any colleges and universities where the president, for example, has complete authority to spend foundation funds as he or she deems appropriate, like to fill budget holes or whatever? And is that a good thing? And are there any safeguards against that if it's not a good thing, either at the system level or at the local level in the foundations?
Forgive me, I had a hard time hearing the first part of your question. Can you repeat it?
I'm wondering if there are any, have you looked at whether any colleges or universities have arrangements with their foundations such that the president of the college or university has complete discretion on how to spend money raised by the foundation, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in the opinion of our system, and if it's a bad thing, if there's any controls at the system or local level to preclude that.
For the question. The Related Foundation Board is responsible for managing the foundation's financial resources, including authorizing fundraising strategies, budgeting the use of funds, and establishing investment policy. The college or university president is a ex officio, so non-voting member of the board. So that authority, it's to inform, right? Can have strategic conversations with the foundation's board of directors, but the authority lies within the foundation's board of directors. So we have that outlined in board policy, and we also have a contract between the related foundation and the college or university that outlines those responsibilities, if you will, and the lanes of a college employee / president, as well as the foundation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Erlinson and then Chancellor Olson.
Thank you.
Excuse me, we have one more policy to review, so we'll move through this quickly.
Just to add some color to what Jen said, Chair Sol, used to be the chair of the Minneapolis Community and Technical College Foundation and ran nonprofits. If a donor says the money will be used for X, the foundation must use the money for X. Foundations are also accountable, I believe, to the Attorney General in Minnesota and to the IRS. But if a donor, like an alumni, sends in $100, the foundation could use that for whatever they want. They could use it to pay the athletic director, they could use it for a student scholarship, they could buy art supplies. So it depends on if there's restrictions or not. And then to what Jen said, but the foundation's own rules are set by its board. Is that fair, Jen?
Yes, that's fair.
Chancellor Olson, quick, no? Okay. Thank you for the questions. We're going to move to a second policy, 8.5.
So policy 8.5 is on local advisory committees. And it's been quite some time since it's been reviewed. This is the proposed amendments first reading, and there's only technical edits. So what you see in your board packet are only a few slight change of words there. The purpose of the local advisory committees is to promote and secure support for college and university programs and services, and to advise the president about ways in which programs and services can be responsive to the needs of students and to the service area, as well as other purposes as defined by the president. Again, only technical edits are proposed.
Thank you. And I think it emphasizes that it's an advisory. Yeah, sometimes that needs clarification to advisory groups, that it's advisory to the foundation boards. I'll open it up to questions if there are any. Trustee Hish.
Thank you, Chair and Sharon. I'm perfectly fine with the edits on here. So this is more just broader with regards to advisory boards. Is there any look across institutions when you have programs that are in similar areas to be able to come together? Because I know for a lot of employers, they get asked, well, can you sit on this advisory board of this department, and various similar ones across different institutions? Do we have is there a value in trying to weave that together a little bit so that especially institutions that are in a similar geographic area could have a shared advisory board model? And then the second piece of it is there any guidance that we provide to departments on how best to use advisory boards? Because it can be hit or miss at times. Some that you have a department chair that's really engaged with it and connects with the advisory board members, and then you might have a change in leadership, and that new department chair might not know exactly how best can I make use of it, and we actually create kind of a disincentive for engagement from employers and from others in the community. So just something beyond the scope of this, but something I hope we would think about.
Thank you, Trustee Hipsch, for the question. And I guess I would welcome our president liaisons if they wanted, could respond to his comments made about local advisory committees on your campus.
President Johnson.
I would assume that all of our colleges have that in place. We certainly do at Ridgewater. I consider them a critical part of what we do. Primarily, at least at Ridgewater, it's been more about the program content, the curriculum, student success, grad success, things like that in pockets. And right now we have some opportunities where there's room for fundraising, where they could either inform or even help participate in trying to help achieve some goal of getting a significant purchase or improvement made. So it's a critical part of what we do, and you did put your finger on a key part of it, is how do we how do we effectively monitor that they're really being as effective as they can be? And there needs to be some turnover. And what we've done at Ridgewater is the faculty are still heavily engaged, but our dean is really charged with making sure what is the makeup and how long have people been on it, and are we bringing in people who, for example, have no background in our college at all. We don't want all former graduates, for example. We want other folks who are involved. We need some diversity of thinking and background. So we've done a pretty good job of starting to move in that direction, and I think that's critical for them to be effective. Otherwise, it's very easy for them to turn over time into checking a box because it's the same people and we're used to the same thing that we've been doing and it's good enough. That sounds more critical than I mean. I don't want to say that that's happening all over in our college, but that's what I think we have to watch for. So I think you put your finger on a key part of that, that I would hope we're all trying to do as presidents and our administrators under us.
Thank you. Our time has lapsed. I appreciate your attention and appreciation to the importance of these policies. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.
So the lunch back where we came from. Yeah, 12:45. 12:45.
You can leave your stuff here. It's gonna be watched, so when. This is